discussing the various aspects of language in the block number second and third. Now we would like to discuss the block number fourth. And here we are going to talk about sociolinguistics. Sociolinguistics, my dear friends, is the descriptive study of the effect of any and all aspects of society, including cultural norms, expectations, and context on the way language is used, and the effects of language use on society. Sociolinguistics differs from sociology of language in that the focus of sociolinguistics is the effect of the society on the language, while the sociology of language focuses on language's effect on the society. Sociolinguistics overlaps to a considerable degree with pragmatics. It is historically closely related to linguistic anthropology, and the distinction between the two fields have been questioned recently. So, as we were talking, my dear friends, sociolinguistics actually is a branch of linguistics that studies the social impacts and related features of society on linguistics actually, and how both of them are interrelated. It also studies how language varieties differ between groups separated by certain social variables, for example, ethnicity, religion, status, gender, level of education, age, etc., and how creation and adherence to these rules is used to categorize individuals in social or socio-economic classes. As the usage of a language varies from place to place, language usage also varies among social classes. And it is these social acts that sociolinguistics studies. So, as we know, my dear friends, there are various actually things that are related to the human use of language. And you see that the use of language varies from one place to another place, from one situation to another situation, and that is why that particular field of study is called sociolinguistics. And in that actually we study the different features related to language and its different, you see, approaches related to society also. This is how sociolinguistics, you see, the study of sociolinguistics is concerned. The social aspects of language were, in the modern sense, first studied by Indian and Japanese linguists in the 1930s, and also by Lewis in Switzerland in the early 19th century, but none received much attention in the West until much later. So as we were talking, you see, this is, you see, a very important feature that you see these were two Indian and one Japanese and one Indian, those who studied and they tried to study the, you see, the domain of sociolinguistics first of all. The study of the social motivation of language change, on the other hand, has its foundation in the wave model of the late 19th century. The first attested use of the term sociolinguistics was by Thomas Callan Hodgson in the title of his 1939 article, Sociolinguistics in India, published in Man in India. So this was, you see, Thomas Callan, who was the first person who used this title, Sociolinguistics. And you see, he published his article in Man in India, and there actually he expressed his, you see, the theory related to sociolinguistics. Sociolinguistics in the West first appeared in the 1960s and was pioneered by linguists such as William Labov in the US and Basil in the UK. You see these two important names. We need to remember, as far as sociolinguistics is concerned, these two names are also concerned. They are very well known in the field of sociolinguistics. You see William Labov and Basil. These two names, you see, are the pioneer names in the field of sociolinguistics. In the 1960s, William Stewart and Heinz Claus introduced the basic concepts for the sociolinguistic theory of pluricentric languages, which describes how standard language varieties differ between nations. For example, American, British, Canadian, Australian English, Austrian, German, Swiss, German, Bosnian, Croatian, Montenegrin, Serbian, Serbo-Croatian. So these are the, you see, different varieties actually of English. So these are the different, you see, the dialects and you see the language varieties. So as we were talking, my dear friends, these two, William Labob and you see Basil, we have to remember their names because they were the pioneer, you see, the linguists in the field of sociolinguistics, and these people actually tried to invent and tried to propose a new theory, new theories in the field of sociolinguistics. Sociolinguists might determine through study of social attitudes that a particular vernacular would not be considered appropriate language use in a business or professional setting. Sociolinguists might also study the grammar, phonetics, vocabulary, and other aspects of this social act, much as dialectologists would study the same for a regional dialect. The study of language variation is concerned with social constraints, determining language in its contextual environment. Code switching is the term given to the use of different varieties of language in different social situations. So, you see, my dear friends, this is how we were talking, and the sociolinguistics studies are concerned with the social life. And you see, as we were talking, the applications of social linguistics actually, how you see the linguistics and social linguistics and these parts that are very important in our life and in our social life, how can they be related with the language, and how language is related with the social, with the how language is related with the social life. All these things are studied actually in the domain of sociolinguistics, my dear friends. You see, my friends, William Labob is often regarded as the founder of the study of sociolinguistics. He is especially noted for introducing the quantitative study of language variation and change, making the sociology of language into a scientific discipline. So, you see, he was one of the primary people, he was one of the primary, you see, the primary, you see, the propounders of the field of sociolinguistics, and tried to, you see, propose it for the betterment of the linguistics. Now here we come for multilingualism. Multilingualism is the use of two or more languages, either by an individual speaker or by a community of speakers. Multilingual speakers outnumber monolingual speakers in the world's population. Multilingualism is becoming a social phenomenon governed by the needs of globalization and cultural openness. Owing to the ease of access to information facilitated by the internet, individuals' exposure to multiple languages is becoming increasingly frequent, thereby promoting a need to acquire additional languages. So, you see, multilingualism. We are speaking many languages these days. We are speaking mother tongue, we are speaking international language, we are speaking the national language, we are speaking the territorial languages. So, because actually we are in atmosphere today that we are bound to speak more languages today, because this is the need of the hour. We can't avoid it. The definition of multilingualism is a subject of debate in the very same way as the definition of language fluency. On one end of a sort of linguistic continuum, one may define multilingualism as complete competence and mastery in another language. The speaker would presumably have complete knowledge and control over language so as to sound native. On the opposite end of the spectrum would be people who know enough phrases to get around as a tourist using the alternate language. Since 1992, B.B. Cook has argued that most multilingual speakers fall somewhere between minimal and maximal definitions. Cook calls these people multicompetent. You see, the concept had changed. The more the better is the concept these days, you see. And you see, even the critics call, like Cook and all, they call it multicompetent people, you see, because these people are speaking many more languages, and because they can adjust themselves in the different situations. They can speak different languages. They can, you see, communicate in many languages. So they are multi-talented people. In addition, there is no consistent definition of what constitutes a distinct language. For instance, scholars often disagree whether Scots is a language in its own right. or a dialect of English. Please underline. Please, you see, this thing you need to understand actually. You see, this has always been a question. And often scholars disagree whether Scots is a language or it's a dialect. Furthermore, what is considered a language can change, often for purely political purposes, such as when Serbo-Croatian was created as a standard language on the basis of the Eastern Herzegovinian dialect to function as umbrella for numerous South Slavic dialects. And after the breakup of Yugoslavia was split into Serbian, Croatian, Bosnian, and Montenegrin, or when Ukrainian was dismissed as a Russian dialect by the Russian czars to discourage national feelings. Bilingualism. Many small independent nations' school children are today compelled to learn multiple languages because of international interactions. For example, in Finland, all children are required to learn at least 2 foreign languages. The other national language, Swedish or Finnish, and one alien language is usually English. Many Finnish school children also select further languages such as German or Russian. In some large nations with multiple languages, such as India, school children may routinely learn multiple languages based on where they reside in the country. In major metros of Central, South, and East India, many children may be fluent in 4 languages: the mother tongue, the state language, and the official languages of India, Hindi and English. Thus, a child of Gujarati parents living in Bangalore will end up speaking his or her mother tongue at home and the state language, Hindi and English in school and his or her surroundings. So the next topic comes for the language standardization. Which language is a standard language and how a language can become a standard language. So these are all the issues that we need to address, you see, in these coming slides. So, and this is a very important part also. A standard language is a language variety used by a group of people in their public discourse. Alternatively, varieties become a standard by undergoing a process of standardization, during which it is organized for description in grammars and dictionaries and encoded in such reference works. Typically, varieties that become standardized are the local dialects spoken in the centers of commerce and government, where a need arises for a variety that will serve more than local needs. A standard language can be either pluricentric, for example, English, German, Serbo, Croatian, French, Portuguese, and Spanish, or monocentric, for example, Icelandic, Italian, Japanese, and Russian. In linguistics, you see, these are the multilingual use of codes. Because we are using the language for the different purposes. We are using language in multilingual purposes. So code switching and code mixing are bound to happen. And these are the, you see, the natural things that take place there actually. In linguistics, code switching occurs when a speaker alternates between 2 or more languages or language varieties in the context of a single conversation. Multilingual speakers of more than one language sometimes use elements of multiple languages when conversing with each other. Thus, code switching is the use of more than one linguistic variety in a manner consistent with the syntax and phonology of each variety. So, this is how actually you see in the day-to-day life we need to change the codes and all, because you see it is all mixing and code switching because the situation demands. That is why code switching is distinct from other language contact phenomena, such as borrowing, pidgins, and creoles, loan translation, and language transfer, that is language interference. Borrowing affects the lexicon, the words that make up a language, while code switching takes place in individual utterances. Speakers form and establish a pidgin language when 2 or more speakers who do not speak a common language form an intermediate third language. On the other hand, speakers practice code switching when they are each fluent in both languages. Code mixing is a thematically related term. but the usage of the terms code switching and code mixing varies. Some scholars use either term to denote the same practice, while others apply code mixing to denote the formal linguistic properties of language contact phenomena, and code switching to denote the actual spoken usages by multilingual persons. In the 1940s and 1950s, many scholars considered code switching to be a substandard use of language. Since the 1980s, however, most scholars have come to regard it as a normal natural product of bilingual and multilingual language use. The term code switching is also used outside the field of linguistics. Some scholars of literature use the term to describe literary styles which include elements from more than one language. As in novels by Chinese American, Anglo Indian, or Latino writers, in popular usage, code switching is sometimes used to refer to relatively stable, informal mixtures of two languages, such as Hindi and English. Both in popular usage and in sociolinguistic study, the name code switching is sometimes used to refer to switching among dialects, styles, or registers, as practiced by speakers of African American vernacular English as they move from less formal to more formal settings. The next comes language planning, you see. So language planning is also, my dear friends, is a very important issue actually. Because you see, this is a multilingual world. This is the era of globalization. Now we need to learn many languages. So how to decide what to learn, what not to learn? And you see, at the same time, we need to preserve our culture. So language planning includes the different motives and the efforts and the aims and objectives that are to be taken, you see, in order to make a policy. So language planning is a deliberate effort to influence the function, structure, or acquisition of language or language variety within a speech community. It is often associated with the government planning, but is also used by a variety of non-governmental organizations, such as grassroots organizations and even individuals. The goals of language planning differ depending on the nation or organization, but generally include making planning decisions and possibly changes for the benefit of communication. Planning or improving effective communication can also lead to other social changes, such as language shift or assimilation, thereby providing another motivation to plan the structure, function, and acquisition of the language. Language engineering involves the creation of natural language processing systems whose cost and outputs are measurable and predicatable, as well as establishment of language regulators, such as formal or informal agencies, committees, societies, or academies, as language regulators to design or develop new structures to meet contemporary needs. It is a distinct field contrasted to natural language processing and computational linguistics. A recent trend of language engineering is the use of semantic web technologies for the creation, archival processing, and retrieval of machine processable language data. For overreaching language ideologies motivate decision making and language planning. The first, linguistic assimilation, is the belief that every member of a society, irrespective of his native language, should learn and use the dominant language of the society in which he or she lives. A quintessential example is the English-only movement in the United States. There they want to learn English only because that is the most powerful language of the society. Linguistic assimilation stands in direct contrast to the second ideology, linguistic pluralism, the recognition and support of multiple languages within one society. And that is the linguistic pluralism, you see, where you have the respect and honor for the different other languages. Also, you think that the other languages are also as well necessary for your development, for the development of society. And so, you need to learn many other languages. Examples include the coexistence of French, German, Italian, and Romansh in Switzerland, and the shared status of English, Malay, Tamil, and Chinese in Singapore. The coexistence of many languages may not necessarily arise from a conscious language ideology, but rather from the efficiency in communication of a common language. The third ideology, vernacularization, denotes the restoration and development of an indigenous language along with its adoption by the state as an official language. Examples include Hebrew in the state of Israel and Quechua in Peru. The final ideology, internationalization, is the adoption of non-indigenous language of wider communication as an official language. Or in a particular domain, such as the use of English in Singapore, India, the Philippines, and Papua New Guinea. So these are the various examples actually where the language is used for the different purposes in different situations. Conversational analysis, commonly abbreviated as CA, is an approach to the study of social interaction, embracing both verbal and non-verbal conduct in situations of everyday life. As its name implies, CA began with a focus on casual conversation, but its methods were subsequently adapted to embrace more task and institution-centered interactions, such as those occurring in doctors' offices, courts, law enforcement, helplines, educational settings, and the mass media. As a consequence, the term conversation analysis has become something of a misnomer, but it has continued as a term for the distinctive and successful approach to the analysis of social interaction. So this is actually a conversation analysis. This is how it is known for. As in all research, conversational analysis begins by setting up a research problem. The data collected for CA is in the form of video or audio recorded conversations. The data is collected with or without researchers' involvement, often simply by adding a video camera to the room where the conversation takes place. For example, medical doctor's consultation with a patient. From the audio or video recording, the researchers construct a detailed transcription, ideally with no details left out. After transcription, the researchers perform inductive data-driven analysis aiming to find recurring patterns of interaction. Based on the analysis, the researchers develop a rule or model to explain occurrence of the patterns. Here comes the second language acquisition. This is one of the very important features of this block, my dear friends. How we acquire the second language actually, that is called L2. How we acquire the second language, because the first language comes with mother's milk. That is how it is called mother's language. But when we are talking about the second language, you see, this is a different kind of acquisition. This is a different kind of learning. So here actually we would like to see that second language acquisition, second language learning, or L2 acquisition is the process by which people learn a second language. Second language acquisition, often abbreviated to SLA, also refers to the scientific discipline devoted to studying that process. Second language refers to any language learned in addition to a person's first language. Although the concept is named second language acquisition, it can also incorporate the learning of third, fourth, or subsequent languages. Second language acquisition refers to what learners do. It does not refer to practices in language teaching, although teaching can affect acquisition. Adults who learn a second language differ from children learning their first language in at least 3 ways. Children are still developing their brains, whereas adults have conscious minds. And adults have at least a first language and that orient their thinking and speaking. You see, learning of a child and learning of an adult are always different actually. Because children are at their developing stage, so their brain is something like that. Whereas, you see, it is not so with the adults. They have one language already there in their mindset, and that, you see, language always orients them. Although some adult second language learners reach very high levels of proficiency, pronunciation tends to be non-native. When a second language learner's speech plateaus, it is known as fossilization. Some errors that second language learners make in their speech originate in their first language. For example, Spanish speakers learning English may say, "is raining," rather than "it is raining," leaving out the subject of the sentence. French speakers learning English, however, do not usually make the same mistake. This is because pronominal and impersonal sentence subjects can be omitted. Origin in this case are not used in the first place in Spanish but not in French. This kind of influence of the first language on the second is known as negative language transfer. Also, when people learn a second language, the way they speak their first language changes in subtle ways. These changes can be with any aspect of language, from pronunciation and syntax to gestures the learners make and the things they tend to notice. For example, French speakers who spoke English as a second language pronounce the T sound in French differently from monolingual French speakers. This kind of change in pronunciation has been found even at the onset of second language acquisition. For example, English speakers pronounce the pa, te, ke sounds as well as English vowels differently after they begin to learn Korean. These effects of the second language and the first led Vivian Cook to propose the idea of multi-competence. It sees the different languages a person speaks not as separate systems, but as related systems in their mind. Learner language is the written or spoken language produced by a learner. It is also the main type of data used in second language acquisition research. Much research in second language acquisition concerned with the internal representations of a language in the mind of the learner and in how those representations change over time. It is not yet possible to inspect these representations directly with brain scans or similar techniques, so SLA researchers are forced to make inferences about these rules from learners' speech or writing. So this is how actually these, you see, the second language acquisition is related, my dear friends. And you see, this is always different from what, you see, the mother tongue learning is. Because mother tongue is a different kind of thing. It automatically comes actually. And as far as the second language is concerned, that does not come. Because two things are different. When we are learning the second language at the childhood level, so then the story is completely different. And when we are learning, you see, the second language at the higher level, or when we are at the adulthood, then the case is totally different. Because, you see, there the situation changes. Because at the adulthood, the one language is already there in the mindset of the adults actually. And that language always creates some kind of hurdle, some kind of, you see, mismatching, some kind of difficulties, some kinds of problems actually. Whereas this problem is not there in the mindsets of the young children, because they are at their developing stage, they are just growing actually, their mind is also growing, their mind is very conscious. So they don't have any problem, my dear friends. They actually automatically learn that language, it is whatever, it is even the first language or the second language. They do not have those kind of difficulties, or they don't have those many difficulties, I would rather say, that many, you see, these adults people have actually. So that is the difference, you see, in the second language acquisition when it is in the case of a child and in the case of an adult. So this block is over, I think, my dear friends. In this block, we have so far discussed about, you see, the language and the sociolinguistic part of the language, and then the, you see, language planning. And then we have also talked about the multilingualism, that is a very serious and a very, you see, important issue in the global world. And you see, the people, those who are able to speak many languages are the called multi-talented people. So, and after that, we talked about the second language acquisition. So these were the main features, my dear friends, that have been talked about in this block. Thank you very much.